Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the fact that range of motion on chest exercises is actually quite an arbitrary thing. Because generally we tell people for hypertrophy purposes, it's usually desirable to go through the longest effective range of motion, right? People say full range of motion, but that's not what they mean. Okay, that's not what they mean because not every single joint in our body is it ideal for us to take heavy loads through the full range of motion of the joint. And I think for chest presses, we definitely fall into that category. And in fact, the further the bar path is, or the dumbbell path, or the machine path, or whatever it is that you're using for a chest press is, the higher it is up your chest sometimes, the worse of an idea it can be to go through a longer range of motion. Okay? And it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible with anything other than dumbbells with a wide grip or a dip to go through the full range of motion of the shoulder joint anyways, right? And how many people get hurt when they try to do that? Like, how common are injuries among people who attempt to do that? They're very, very common. Chest press is not intended to be a full range of motion movement. And if you think about it, in any place in nature other than against a bar or something that could push your hand further back, you would never push with your chest against anything in which your hands go further back behind your rib cage. So we a lot of times might look at that and say, oh, okay, so that's our natural range of motion, in a dynamic environment, whether it's a sport or a struggle or pushing some heavy object. That's pretty much anything we would ever do as humans all throughout history. Yeah, that pretty much makes sense. But even then, isn't that a bit arbitrary? If we have similar shoulder joint angles, but some people have a bigger chest than others, their range of motion is different. That's why the bench press itself is kind of an arbitrary range of motion. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying the bench press isn't great. I want people to understand that. I'm just saying that it's an arbitrary range of motion from person to person. My bench press range of motion on the joint angle might be 4 inches shallower than yours. Or in your case, you might actually have 1 inch less range of motion than me if you have an even bigger chest and rib cage. There's people out there who do. I've met them. So in that case, what is our full range of motion? Okay, what's our full range of motion? And this is why people freak out and they'll see you do a floor press and say, oh, that's a partial. Well, in my case, depending on how much I arch or whatever, it's 1 inch off my chest, or if I do a different position, I can touch my chest. Okay. We all have different arm lengths. Our range of motion itself, my range of motion on the bench press in terms of the actual total length of it might be 6 inches longer than yours. And it even varies as far as our grip widths go. Okay. Same thing in the case of this buffalo bar. I'm doing closed grip presses with the buffalo bar. Well, closed grip press actually is a longer range of motion. We can argue that it doesn't necessarily put more stretch on the pecs, but the range of motion itself is longer. But I'm using the buffalo bar to add 1 inch to the bottom. This lets me get my hands 1 inch further back. There can be hypertrophy benefits to that. But you'll have other people who on a bench press, due to their structure, the full range of motion is excessive. Okay, I have really skinny clients. People say, why would really skinny guys be hiring you? I don't know, because they want to bulk up. If you're 30 pounds underweight and you want to get bigger and stronger, you very well might hire me. I definitely have people in that category. More than one. And I have my eating disorder guys. All right, a lot of those guys, touching their chest with the bench press puts strain on the shoulder. Even if we put them into the correct position, because they're so skinny and underweight. If you have a guy who weighs 120 pounds, 125 pounds, and yes, I have people who are at that weight or less. As of right now, I have 2 clients who are less than 130 as men. You really think that their range of motion is appropriate on that? It's not. They go too far back. It's painful for them to bench press. We floor press. So realistically, what are we looking for? We're looking for an effective range of motion. We're looking for joint angles. And that's the thing with a movement like this, it's kind of arbitrary, isn't it? Full range of motion is never appropriate on a true chest press. Now, obviously, it can be determined on a bench. You can take a bench press, and we know what full range of motion of the bench press is. But that's based upon individual structure and chest size, isn't it? Chest size, rib cage size can affect it by several inches from person to person, okay? We know the full range of motion in exercise, but what about when we talk about picking exercises with an effective range of motion? Well, if I want a little more stretch, I go to a buffalo bar, or we could go to dumbbells. But at least with this, if I go to a buffalo bar, what do we have? We can control the exact terminal range of motion. On a dumbbell, we might not. We might not be able to on a dumbbell. And for some people, maybe the dumbbell has a potential to go too low. Most people, when they grab a dumbbell, they don't do full range of motion, which is kind of really hilarious. That's the most hilarious thing in the world. Someone might say, why? Why is that hilarious? Because the whole benefit of a dumbbell is the fact that you can take it through a longer range of motion than the barbell. There are no other benefits really for a dumbbell chest press. And that's actually quite a big benefit. Deeper stretch on the pecs. We get a deeper stretch with more tension on the pec due to the angle, because the lower our angle goes, the more tension on the pec. Also more strain on the shoulder. So by that same token, we should definitely be using lighter weights for more reps on a dumbbell press. It's one reason I tell people they start wanting to do 5s or 6s on a dumbbell press. I'm like, you're a moron. You specifically selected a variation of a movement that puts more strain on the shoulder joint so that you can get a deeper stretch on the pecs. Well, if we want a deeper stretch on a muscle, we're usually trying to generate a lot more fatigue and more volume. You should be doing higher reps anyways, because that's the whole point of a movement like that to begin with. And if you're going to have something that puts a deeper stretch on your shoulders, you start doing a 5 or 6 rep max on it. Don't cry when you damage a shoulder, right? Don't cry when you get an impingement. Don't cry when you tear a ligament of some type in there. Same thing. We've seen guys trying to ego lift with a dumbbell press tear a pec. Devin Physique did it, tore his pec right there on camera. So when we're picking these exercises, you need to assess the range of motion that you're picking and what you're doing. What are you trying to do with it? Same thing, you see the weighted dip there. Weighted dip has an unlimited range of motion. You go too low, though, and you're going to injure yourself. So a lot of times we go till we feel just a certain amount of stretch on the pec. That's how I do mine. I lower it until I feel a stretch reflex engaged in my pectorals. Because that's why we do it, right? A dip, not only do we get to move our body through space, not only is it a phenomenal tricep exercise, but it puts a stretch on the pecs. It allows us to get a stretch reflex. And I like to use bands to make that stretch reflex stronger. Right? It's one reason I do them against bands. Yeah, it adds resistance, just like adding plates does. But again, it can amplify the stretch reflex. I go down just so I feel a stretch. And now, where do I feel the stretch? As soon as I hit parallel. Look, I hit parallel, maybe a hair below. Right? We go a little bit below parallel on the dip, and I get that deep contraction and a stretch reflex. What's full range of motion? We could do the same thing. How about guys who do board pressing for triceps and other stuff as a chest press? Done correctly, that can be a phenomenal tricep exercise, but it's certainly not a full range of motion. We could argue about how it improves the raw bench or not, and that's a very complicated topic in and of itself. That's an extremely complicated topic. It could help your raw bench, or it could actually be a complete waste of recovery resources. Tell you right now, though, if you're doing it for thinking your pecs are going to grow from it, that's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. You don't ever put enough tension on your pecs off of boards. Tricep movements, it can. Impacts on certain parts of the strength curve, depending on specifically what you're doing, it can. But you better know what you're doing when you try to do that. That is not for the novice. You're not going to be able to figure it out. People frequently get that wrong. But a board press, it's still a chest press, it's a partial. And that's because the whole thing's an arbitrary range of motion, isn't it? It's really arbitrary, and you really have to look closely when we're dealing with chest exercises, as specifically what it is you're trying to do. We're looking for your effective range of motion towards a specific goal. Because the deeper we go, the more chest stimulation we can, in theory, get, but we also put more and more stress on the shoulder joint. So it's kind of a balancing act. It's a balancing act. Now, I would always say if you're going to do a bench press, obviously you want to take it through the full range of motion. Otherwise, why do a bench press? If you can't safely touch your chest on a bench press without risk of injury, you don't need to be doing a bench press to begin with, because you really shouldn't be doing an arbitrary range of motion on that. Right? You need to go to a partial of some type, which is going to be a board press, floor press, something like that. Okay. So I would never advocate people be arbitrary in their range of motion with the barbell. You're actually at a much, much higher risk of injury doing that. But you still might be unable to do that safely based upon your current structure and the current thickness of your chest and rib cage. So this is stuff that we have to pay attention to. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.